Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is another exciting weekly installation of Harry Talks to a Camera in an Empty Room. Just kidding. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This week, I'm very excited about this week. I'm gonna, I think, conclude video 3 of 3 about React hooks. This episode is kind of pulling everything together where we're going to actually live code making an entire mini application using hooks. If you're new around here, welcome. So glad of you to be a subscriber. If you're a subscriber, be sure to enable notifications so that when I upload a new video, you get notified directly into your inbox so I can talk straight to you. But this week, yeah, I'm very, very excited about this week. I was playing around with this in preparing to actually record this video, and it came out pretty cool. It's not going to look pretty because I'm not focusing on CSS at all. This is just JavaScript with React hooks, and this episode is cool. It's going to show you how to use useReducer, to use use context, to use useEffect, and to use useRef. All these base primitive hooks we're going to use together to make a very, very fancy to-do app. But it's a to-do app just because that's easy to show you, but you could easily extrapolate how these tools and design patterns that I'm going to show you today could be used for any type of application. If you have like a list of users that you want to actually show to a end user how to actually use hooks to actually show just a list of things. It's not necessarily to-dos, it's just a list of things, and be able to share state via context and using the hooks APIs to actually make that the most pleasant development experience. I could talk more about this, but I think you're most interested in actually just seeing what I'm saying. So let's begin. Okay, so we're starting with the scariest screen of all, a blank screen. I hate blank screens, so the first thing I want to do with our application is actually get some initial just text on here. This is my to-dos app. I hate blank screens, both for applications, even writing blog posts. They are my biggest enemy. So just let's get away from that right now. And what we're going to be doing today is making a to-dos app, which is just going to be an array of items. So the first thing I want to do is actually we're going to use the useReducer hook that is provided part of the proposed hooks API. useReducer is similar to useState, and it's also very similar to Redux if you are familiar with Redux. When you use the useReducer hook, you actually have the first argument is a reducer that you're using. So we're going to have this be our app reducer, and the second argument is going to be the initial value. And in our case, it's just going to be an array. What you get back from here is state of the object from useReducer and a dispatch function. This should look familiar if you've ever messed with Redux before. The reason why we're using useReducer instead of useState in this case, which is a great question that I hear you asking, is that because this is an application, we're going to have indirect children that want to then update state. And yes, we could make custom functions and pass that down. However, this is actually also talked about in the FAQ on the hooks page, but a better pattern is to simply pass down the dispatch function via context. So we're going to build up to that. I just want to first show you what the useReducer API looks like. So we have here state dispatch. We haven't defined the app reducer yet, so let's do that now. App reducer is the same type of reducer function that you're used to from Redux, where you take a state and an action as your two arguments. The typical pattern is to use a switch statement to actually tell what you want to change. And so in our case, we're going to switch off of action.type. If you use Redux, again, this should be very, very familiar. And in our case, we're going to look for the add action type. And then what you actually return from this reducer is what the next state will be. So in our case, we're going to return an array. We're going to copy over state, and we're going to add in a new item. For ID, we're going to use date.now as a simple, unique identifier. We're going to have text of empty text. We're going to say completed is false. So you can complete or not complete a to-do. So now I want to actually render these items on the page. So to do that, we're going to just do a simple state.map. We're going to have there be an item, and we're just going to have it be div key equals item.id, and we're just going to have this be item.id, just for easy use cases now. And then we have to then use the dispatch function, which is what useReducer uses. We're actually going to make a simple button here that on click is going to pass an anonymous function, and we're going to dispatch the type of add. So we'll say new to do. So let's save that. We have this new to do. So now if we hit that, we can see a new to do item being rendered. We're dispatching a action, we're switching off the action type, and we're returning a new item. Cool, this is working. I can refresh the page, and again, add new things as I go. So that's useReducer. It's very similar. Oh, let's also return a default handler. So if I do return state, just good practice there, and save that there. So as our application gets more complex, we're going to add new action types that we're going to be listening to when we actually dispatch actions to our reducer. Completely similar to Redux, but now it's built directly into React, which makes it pretty easy to make a self-contained page of state that can be shared across many children that are direct and indirect. I don't really have to worry about going into Redux itself. It's kind of built into React now itself. So now let's build this out a little bit more. We're actually going to have our page grow up a little bit. We're actually going to make a to-dos list component just for sake of application architecture. And we're actually going to yank this and have this return down here. Let's delete these braces. We don't need this. This is actually going to be items. That's items. And this is doing the same thing as we had before. And up here, we're just going to have this be to-dos list items equals state. Save that. And everything should be working here right now. Great. Let's further make for a nice application architecture. We're actually going to make a to-do item to actually have that be encapsulated. And for now, all we need is an ID. And we're just going to return this in here and return that. We have to-do item right there. Save that. Yes, I know this needs to be an ID. Save that. And pass in the rest of the to-do item information. So we can just do item here, just slap that onto there. Save that, and now we actually see that showing up. So cool, we now have this nice application architecture that is working correctly. Let's actually fill out to-do item with more information in here. We're actually going to add some style to this because we're actually going to make this look a little bit more intense. We're actually going to have 3 elements in here. Instead of just the ID, we're actually going to have a input type of checkbox. We're going to have the checked value be completed, which is, you remember from before. We're just going to do that for now. Let's up this here. So completed. We also need to have there be a text value, and that's all we need right there. So we're going to yank that. We're going to have this be input type equals text. We're just going to say default value for now is text. We're not going to worry about the change. And then we're actually going to have a button which has the ability to delete. So let's save that. Now if I update this, you can see our lovely to-do list items being rendered for us. Let's add some space. We're going to use the most powerful of all HTML components, the break line. We need more break lines. Cool. So we are now rendering simple application structure. But what we actually want to add right now is both the ability to check completed and delete. Right now these don't do anything, and to do that we're actually going to pass down the dispatch function into each individual to-do item, and instead of just kind of needling the thread as it's called before, like doing dispatch equals dispatch, going here, then passing it down to here again and again and again, that doesn't scale that very well. So the answer to that in React land is context. Context used to be kind of scary before it actually was made official. It was like an unofficial API. It was there. It was kind of not encouraged to use, but now it's actually encouraged to use. And we're actually going to make our own local context object. So we're going to say context equals react.create context. And then we're going to use the provider. So provider, and we say the value that we're passing down here is dispatch. So what this does is that any child of provider can then grab the dispatch value that's being provided in its own local area. And then to actually grab that, we could use context.provider, which is a render callback function, but instead we're going to use another hook, which is use context. And this is a really cool way of making it easier to use context. We're actually going to have this be dispatch. Use context is going to be context from that instance that we made there. In our case here, we're going to do delete for first. We're going to say on click, we're going to actually have this be dispatch type equals delete, and the payload is going to be ID. So we're going to dispatch that we want to actually delete this item with this ID, and we actually need to handle this in our reducer. So we hit this ID, nothing's happening yet because we're actually not doing anything. If we want to do this for fun, we could say case equals delete. So for that action type, and we can actually just return an empty array, just delete everything, just to do a very like primitive. There, all gone. So that's just adding a new reducer state that we actually want to handle, but we actually want to delete something. So let's do that. We're going to actually return state.filter. We're going to say item equals item.id doesn't equal action.payload. So filter out everything that is not that payload that we're doing there. So we're going to just have this be 1, 2, 3, 4. We delete that. Cool. So we're just doing that one item there. So that's sweet. That's just using dispatch function. Let's do that again with completed. We're actually going to copy and paste this and say completed. And just because you're supposed to return a new object when you actually modify things, we're actually going to do state.map. Well, let me not get ahead of myself here. Let's actually go down to the bottom and have this be on check, on change. I'm going to say dispatch type equals completed, and the payload is going to be ID as well. We're going to save that, and here we're going to actually map to return a new array of values. So we have item, and we're actually going to say if item.id equals action.payload, we're going to return that item, but instead we're going to also then toggle the completed value. So item.completed, and if it's not that item, then we're just going to return it without modifying it at all. So we can save that, do this, 1, 2, 3, check that, not working. Oh yeah, because we gotta actually invert it. Ha 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 ha. Let's do that again here. 1, 2, 3, and look at that, right there. Delete that. Cool. So we have this working. I'm not really gonna worry about saving the text at all because that's just, I don't really, oh fine. We're not gonna worry about that right now. I wanna actually now address another complaint to this application where every time that I refresh it, all my data is gone, which sucks. So let's fix that, and we're going to do a very advanced technique here where we're actually going to save all the data in local storage, a very advanced way to do that. And we're going to use useEffect to actually save it and get it from there. So we're going to say useEffect. It's a way to actually have a side effect somewhere. And we're going to start by just saving our data whenever the data changes. So we're going to go down into our application, and we're going to go here. We're going to say useEffect, pass in an effect function. We're going to say local storage, set item, data. I'm going to say JSON stringify state, and we're actually use the second argument of useEffect to say that to only run this when the state value changes. We'll save that. So make new to-dos. This one's completed. The third one's completed as well. And it's not there because we're actually not loading it up. So let's actually do that as well. So we can use another useEffect here. That's one of the great things about hooks is that you can use these hooks as many times as possible. In fact, it's encouraged. And you're going to see why in a few seconds, actually. So we're actually going to go here. We're going to say local storage dot get item is data. We're going to say this is raw data because we haven't parsed it yet. And what we're actually going to do is dispatch type equals reset, and the payload is going to be JSON parse raw. So we're going to dispatch the reset event with the entire payload. So then we actually just need to handle that here and say reset. So when we actually reset, we're going to return action.payload to actually return all that content. So now, make new items. You see some crazy things going on. And that's because this useEffect is happening every time, which we don't want to do. Let's actually comment that out because this is kind of wigging out. This useEffect is interesting. We actually only want this to run one time. And there's an easy way to do that. We could have this just be here, where if you have an empty array, that means just run this for one time, and that will definitely work. So if we do this, like that, 1, 2, refresh the page, it still works. So that's cool with useEffect. That's how you can actually do like a useEffect once. But I actually want to show you how to use another hook called useRef to kind of do the same thing here. This works, it's built in, but there's this other hook called useRef. And this is not necessary. As you saw, we already have an API to do this. This is just for fun and also for teaching use case. useRef, there's a React.createRef API that you use to actually get refs to React components and the elements of them nowadays, but they're actually built to be more abstract than just getting a reference to a component. They're actually built to be just a generic mutable container. And what that means is for languages outside of JavaScript, like ReasonML is kind of where they drew inspiration from this. By default, that language is immutable, but there are certain use cases where you actually want to use mutable state, and they kind of use this container pattern to actually encapsulate where things can be changed and mutated. And they kind of brought that into JavaScript with React. So what we're going to have here is we're going to say did run. I'm going to say useEffect, and the default value is going to be false. And what this does, useRef here, is did run is now an object with one property of current. And that property current is designed to be mutable. So what I'm going to do here is actually I'm going to delete this to actually have it run every time. What we're actually going to do is we're going to say if did run current. So if we didn't run, so if it's not false, then we're going to jump these things into here. Then we're going to set did run current equals true. So when I save this, it works the same way because I am using this mutable ref to actually save state in this function component. This is kind of using like an instance property in a class component, but you can use this via useRef. So you actually want to just save any arbitrary information. You can do that with useRef, which is pretty cool. But this kind of sucks having this all kind of inlined here. So let's actually make our own custom useEffect once hook. And this is why I was saying that having these useEffects being separate things gives us a lot of flexibility, because these two pieces of logic, one is to do with saving, one is to do with retrieving, are decoupled. And that's kind of where the core strength of React hooks come from. So actually I can go here and I can say useEffect once. I'm going to have it be a callback. And then this is what's fun. I can kind of go here and just yank all that code, paste it over there, and then here I'm actually going to call the callback. So then here I can grab this back out, go here and say useEffect once, and I have this as the callback, and I save that. And it works. That is a custom hook that we just made to actually do the same thing essentially. You can do the same thing here if you wanted to just like, go back to the array, but this is just for example use cases where you would have that knowledge there. So that is the entire application with functionality. We have useReducer for easy updating of complex pieces of data, using effect to have side effects to actually save that into local disk. We're using context, the newest official context API, to actually provide a value to any child, and also using the useContext hook to then retrieve the values that's stored in there. This value can be anything that you want. So it can be dispatch, it can be both dispatch and raw. And that is the entirety of all these things that make a very, you can keep expanding on this. Like if you wanted to have a nav that showed metadata about things, you can pass down the state if you wanted to. Like this core application architecture is flexible enough that you can kind of do whatever you want. So that's how to build a very simple application entirely with React hooks. You saw how to use some more advanced primitive hooks to build this application with. These are kind of building blocks that you can kind of then just go from there on out into your own application, whatever you might need. Hopefully you learned something. I hope you learned something. I always make these videos hoping to teach something. Again, if you are a new subscriber, thank you for joining. If you have friends that you want to share this video with them, then please do. I'm happy to always have new people to talk to. Even though I don't actually see you people, I just see a camera. Have you ever tried talking to a camera? It's hard, especially when like my family's asleep in the next room. You gotta be loud and energetic, but also quiet. TMI, I'm sorry, but I was very excited about this video. So please, if you'd like to share it with your social network, with your friends, family, pets, reptiles, gas station people, I don't know, just, you know, spread the word. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you again next week. New video every week. Hopefully you're hooked, and we'll come back again next week. Bye.